Okay, so on the bottom of Kuf Lamed Aleph Hamid Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Mila v'chol machshira. Amar Mila v'chol machshira doichenes HaShabbos divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer said that the mitzvah of bris Mila and all of the preparations for the mitzvah is doiches Shabbos. Fragt the Gemara Menale Rabbi Eliezer ha. What's the source of Rabbi Eliezer's opinion? It's interesting. The Gemara went through all the other mitzvahs, but now it comes back to what we had in the Mishnah, what we're talking about over here. The mitzvah, where's the source that Mila is doiches Shabbos, even the machshirin as well? Imikulu Gamar. If you're going to say that we could learn Mila from the rest of the mitzvahs that were brought before, we had the whole history, right? Lulav, sukkah, shofar, matzah, lechem aponim, not lechem aponim, sorry, shtei alechem, oimer. Are we going to learn of any of those? Can't. Kedamrina. We already explained each one of those mitzvahs has a special chumrah that cannot be applied to a bris milah. V'oid, there's another point. Malahanoch, there's something unique about all the other mitzvahs we mentioned till now. Shekenim ovaz mana botla. If the time passes, then the mitzvah is botl, which is not the case by milah. If you don't do the bris milah on the 8th day, true, you missed the mitzvah bismana, but you could do the mitzvah on the 9th day. So we have to have another source to say that not only Mila is doiches Shabbos, but even the machshirin, the preparations for the mitzvah is doiches Shabbos. El haine time of the Rabbi Eliezer. So the reason of Rabbi Eliezer's shitta is the Omakra uvayom hashmini yimel besar or losai. The 8th day, the Torah says you should do the bris. Va'afilu b'Shabbos ubayom. Bayom hashmini means even on Shabbos. That's the source. On this day, including Shabbos. Now the question is, if we have a source from Mila, let's learn out from Mila. Learn all other mitzvahs from Mila that are doiches Shabbos. And answers the Gemara, no, Mila also has something unique. Mila is a mitzvah where it says the term bris in the Torah, in Parshas Lech Lecha, towards the end of the Parsha there, it says 13 times the term bris. There are 13 brisais that the Eibishter says when a Yid makes a bris. So that's a very powerful mitzvah. And you don't find this when you get to any other mitzvah, so therefore this mitzvah is unique. So this is the end of the sugya here, to a large extent, when you get to the limudim according to Shittas Rabbi Eliezer. That not only is the mitzvah itself doiches Shabbos, but the hachana, the hechsher of the mitzvah, is also doiches Shabbos. So it's explained in the Rishonim that the point of Rabbi Eliezer's shitta really is that when you look at a mitzvah, the mitzvah begins when you start doing the actual mitzvah itself, right? But Rabbi Eliezer holds that if the Torah commands to do a mitzvah, and to get that mitzvah done, it demands a certain preparation. The beginning of the mitzvah is really from the machsher. It really starts from before. The lashon that the Rishonim uses, it's like one long mitzvah. If the Torah tells you to put on tefillin, so when does the mitzvah begin? You have to prepare the tefillin in order to be able to put on the tefillin. If the Torah tells you to make a bris, there's hachanas that have to be done for it. So the hachana itself, to some extent, is really part of the mitzvah itself. If you remember before, we had the Gemara that it said that according to Rabbi Eliezer, if the mitzvah is doiches Shabbos, the preparations could be doiches Shabbos, so much so that you don't even have to make an effort to take it from a back way from a chotzer in order to do the mitzvah. You can go to do it in Shus Rabim, to do it quicker, to do it because it's like mamish, like part of the mitzvah itself. And Adarab, it goes even further. There's other places where it says that a hechsher of a mitzvah, a preparation of a mitzvah, is even more powerful than the actual mitzvah itself. When the person does the mitzvah itself, a person can do the mitzvah to be yaitz the mitzvah. When you do a hechsher mitzvah, when a person's preparing the mitzvah, and he's preparing the mitzvah itself, himself, so that shows a greater involvement and attachment and excitement in the mitzvah. That's why he's preparing the mitzvah. So a hechsher mitzvah is a very powerful thing. That's one of the things you see here from Shittas Rabbi Eliezer, even though we don't paskin like his opinion, but you see this idea of Shittas Rabbi Eliezer, how powerful a hechsher mitzvah is.
The hechsher usually takes much longer than the mitzvah itself.
Yeah, a lot of times the mitzvah itself, like lulav, right? The lulav is mamish harega, but the hechsher, the buying the lulav, the and everything else, preparing, even just tying the lulav and everything else, that's much longer. So a lot of times the hechsher is a very, very significant thing. Sagt die Gemara weiter, Ad kan le pliger Rabbanan aleom. So the machlokes here between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Eliezer, what's doiches Shabbos, is ele b'machshirin Mila. They're arguing about the preparation of the mitzvah. Aval Mila gufa, the mitzvah of Mila itself, divrei hakel doiches Shabbos. Everybody agrees that the Mila is doiches Shabbos. Minalon, where do we know this? Omar Ula, so it says halacha. It's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. It's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that it's doiche Shabbos. V'chein Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, halacha. Rabbi Yitzchak also said that it's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Meisvei, fragt the Gemara, could we say it's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai? What we learned in the bris as follows. Minayin l'pekuach nefesh doiches Shabbos. From where do we know that when a person's life is in danger, it's doiches Shabbos? So this is a sugya in Yuma. There's a few different sources that the Gemara gives there, and one of them is as follows. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah Omer, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Ma mila shehi achas me'ivarav shel adam. The mitzvah of mila is in one limb in the body. Doiches Shabbos. It can be doiches Shabbos. Kavachaymer lepikuach nefesh. Definitely pikuach nefesh, which is the entire body of the person. Shadoiches Shabbos. Definitely it will be doiches Shabbos. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah learned out the concept of pikuach nefesh with a kavachaymer from the fact that mila is doiches Shabbos. V'is lo kedaita halacha. If you're going to tell me that the fact that mila is doiches Shabbos is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, kavachaymer mahalacha mi asi. Do we make Kal V'chaimis from a halacha l'Moshe Misinai? This is something we don't do. Kal V'chaima only applies to a pasuk in Chumash. Something that's minat Torah, to that there's the klal of Kal V'chaima. You could learn a Kal V'chaima. In Torah Shebal Peh, or in halacha l'Moshe Misinai, the concept of Kal V'chaima does not apply. So could we make a Kal V'chaima? And the Gemara brings a source for this that it does not apply. But Tanya we learned in the Braisa. Amalei Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said to Rabbi Akiva, Akiva, etzem kisa'oire metame. The fact that the etzem, a bone, in the size of a barley, will make tame. We're talking over here about making tame a nazir. Right? So that the fact that the etzem kisa'oire, a nazir that's not allowed to become tame, will become tame. Halacha, that itself, that size of the barley that makes tame is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Revi is dam, and you want to learn from there that a revi is dam should also make a nazir tami. A revi is dam from a mace should be tami. Kavachaymer, you want to learn it out with a kavachaymer from a etzem kisayri. You can't learn it out with a kavachaymer from there. Why not? Ve'ein donen kavachaymer mahalacha. If etzem kisayri, the size of a bone like a barley, makes tami, that itself is halacha l'Moshe Misinai. To learn from there that the amount of blood of a revi should make tummy with a kavachaymer, you can't, because you don't learn a kavachaymer from halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So we see over here that this is a klal. You never learn a kavachaymer from halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So how could you say that mila is doiches Shabbos is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, and you learn from there the din that pekuach nefesh is doiches Shabbos? Elam Rabbi Elazar, Asya, there's a different limud. Asya ois ois. We learn out Gzeir Shava of ois ois, right? By Shabbos it says ois he, and by Mila it says v'haya la ois. So by both of them it uses the term ois, so we know that Mila can be done on Shabbos. Fragt the Gemara, if that's your limud, elamata tefillin the chsiv ben ois. By tefillin the Torah also uses the term ois. Litchi Shabbos. Tefillin should be doiches Shabbos as well. Ela for the Gemara, so the limud has to be different.
What's the issur?
Huh? No issur. There should be a mitzvah. That you should be mekayim the mitzvah of tefillin. There should be mechuyev to be mekayim the mitzvah of tefillin on Shabbos.
Litchi.
Huh?
What's litchi Shabbos?
Huh?
Isn't that the very reason why we don't put tefillin on Shabbos? Because of this?
Yeah, in the Chanami. True. Okay, good question. Elo sagt the Gemara, Asye bris. There's another Gzeir Shava you learn out. Not ois, but you learn out bris. It says of course by a bris it uses the term bris, and on Shabbos it uses the term bris. Bris beni benechem, a bris olam. So, fragt the Gemara, Gadol the chsiv bei bris litchi Shabbos. Regarding a Gadol, it says the term bris, it should be doiches Shabbos. But when you get to a child that doesn't use the term bris, it shouldn't be doiches Shabbos. Elo asye deiris. So the elamai you learn out the term that it uses deiris. By bris it uses the term deiris, the pasuk that it says le deirai seichem by a bris, and by Shabbos it uses the term bris as well. It says deiris as well. Yeah. Fragt the Gemara, okay, so your limud is to learn out deiris, tzitzis, the chsiv bei deiris, by tzitzis, where it says the term deiris, litchi Shabbos, it should also be doiches Shabbos, to be able to tie tzitzis on Shabbos. So none of these limudim are going to work. If you're going to learn out ois, then it should say tefillin. If you can learn out bris, so then there's a problem with a gadol. You learn out deiris, there's a problem with tzitzis. Elam Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, donin ois bris v'deiris, me ois bris v'deiris. By a bris milah, it uses all three terms of ois, bris, and deiris, and you compare it to Shabbos, where it uses all three terms of ois, bris, and deiris. La fuke hanach, which excludes the others, the chad hu. It only says one thing, and not the chad hu d'chsiv ben. Only one thing that it says, and not, it doesn't use the other terms. Let me just go back 1 second to correct what I said before. B'negei to gadol. The question of the Gemara b'negei to gadol was a mila shaloi bizmana. If you're telling me that you learn out the limud of bris, so why are we saying that only a mila on the 8th day should be deicha Shabbos, even a gadol, which is a mila shaloi bizmana, should also be deicha? Just to spell it out, the pshat over there. Okay. So the Gemara, another limud. This was who? Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, right? Am I right? Was it Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak? Who said this limud over here? Yeah. Rav Yochanan Omar Omakra, the pasuk that you learn out, that mila is deicha Shabbos by Yom. The Torah Omakra by Yom afilu b'Shabbos. The word by Yom teaches even on Shabbos. Right? So Rabbi Eliezer said that from by Yom you learn out that the machsheh is deicha Shabbos. The Rabbanan say, according to Rabbi Yochanan, no, from the word by Yom you learn out when you get to the bris itself, that the bris is deicha Shabbos. Amalei Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. So Reish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, Ela meyata. If the term by Yom that it says by bris teaches me that you deicha Shabbos, if so, mechusrei kapara, those individuals that are obligated to bring a carbon. Right? There's a Zov, there's a Mitzayre, there's a Yeledes, they have to bring a carbon. The Chsiv, Buhu Bayayim, in the Torah regarding those karbanas. It uses the term Bayayim, Hachanami de Docha Shabbos. Should I also say that it's going to be Docha Shabbos? And it says the Gemara, no. Over there, Hahu, Mi Bayale Bayayim V'loi Balayla. Over there, the Pasuk Bayayim is teaching me that the karbanas are brought by day and not by night. Frek the Gemara, that's what you need the term bayayim for. So hay nami mi bayale bayayim v'lei balayla. Say the same thing regarding a bris. The term bayayim is saying by day and not by night. And says the Gemara, no, that we know from another pasuk. Ahu mi ben shmeinas yomim nafke. The Torah says that you wait until the 8th day, and it says but yomim. That's where you learn out that it's by day. Frek the Gemara, if so by karbanis, I also don't need a separate pasuk to teach me that it's brought by day. Hay nami mi bayayim tzavaysay nafke. All karbanis could only be brought by day. I don't need a separate pasuk to say that these karbanis of a zav, a mitzayre, and a yeldis can be brought by day. All karbanis are by day. And for the Gemara, it's tzricha. No, I need a separate pasuk to tell me that they are brought by day. So, I would think that these karbanis are different. Since we see the Torah change, the Torah has rachmanis on these people. These are karbanis that for a poor individual, he can bring a smaller carbon. A rich person brings an animal, a poor person brings a bird, and an even poorer person brings a carbon mincha, just flour and oil. So you see that the Torah changed the dinim of this carbon. So balayla nami leisi. I would say if the Torah is being more lenient and changed the halacha, maybe it could be brought as night as well, different than all karbanis. Kamashmalan, that's why over here you need a special pasuk to teach me that it's brought only by day and not by night. So we have no source to say that it's deicha Shabbos. So Ravina asks a question. If you're telling me that these karbanis of the mechusrei kapara are different than all other karbanis, and you would think that it could even be brought by night, so then maybe it should be different in another sense. Yehezar kashaban. Who says a kayin has to do the aveda? Maybe even a zar could bring these karbanis and do the aveda. Or maybe an einan, an individual that someone passed away and wasn't buried yet, and that day, maybe that should also be kasher to do a carbon. Different than all other karbanis. If you're telling me that it could be brought by night, different than all karbanis, maybe it should be different in other things as well. And for the Gemara, no, but hadre kra. The Torah reinstated it. The Torah said that it could only be brought by day, by writing that extra word by yain. So once it reinstated that it's just like all other karbanis, so it has to be done by a kayin and a person that's not an einan, just like all other karbanis. So this is Rabbi Yochanan's shitta. Rabbi Yochanan says we learned that a bris is deicha Shabbos from the word by yain hashmini. Another opinion, Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar Omakra Shmini. The Torah says the 8th day. Shmini afilu b'Shabbos. So the 8th day, including the bris, could be done even on Shabbos. Frek the Gemara, is that what this word Shmini is teaching me? Hai Shmini mi bayilei lemut shvi. Shmini is simply coming to tell me that it has to be on the 8th day and not on the 7th day. And for the Gemara, no, but that I know from another pasuk. Shvi mi ben shmeinis yamim nafke. It says already in the Torah that the child has to be 8 days old. Fragt the Gemara, but va'akati mi boyelei, I still need a second time the Torah should tell me the 8th day. Chad l'ma'ut tishvi. One time the Torah is saying not before 8 days, has to be on the 8th day. V'chad l'ma'ut tishvi. The second time the Torah says the 8th day, it's coming to be memayit the 9th day, right? The imichat, if it would only say once, mi ben shmeinis yomim, hava mina, I would say, shvi hu duloi mata zimne. You can't make the bris on the 7th day because the time of the bris hasn't arrived yet. Aval mishmini ve'elech, but maybe from the 8th day on, the Torah is not being makbid dafka the 8th day. Zimneu, from the 8th day on, it's the zman of the mitzvah. It's lav dafka the 8th day. So that's why you have to have the Torah write a second time shmini to say that it's dafka the 8th day. Hello, machvarte k'da Rabbi Yechanan. So the best pshat here is, like Rabbi Yechanan said, you don't learn it out from Shmini, you learn it out from the word Bayayim. Bayayim means this day, even on Shabbos. Tanya kavased Rabbi Yechanan, we learned in Abrayse, it clearly says like Rabbi Yechanan. Udoloik Rabacha Bar Yaakov, and the Abrayse says not like Rabacha Bar Yaakov. So the Abrayse starts like this, Shmini Yomel. They have to make the bris on the 8th day. Afilu b'Shabbos. So that means even on Shabbos. Shmini, the 8th day, even on Shabbos. Umani mekayim mechaleleh mois yumas. When the Torah says that if you mechal Shabbos you chayiv misa, it doesn't refer to a bris. B'shar malachas, that refers to any other malachas. Chutz mimila. Besides, if you're making a bris. Oyeno yela afilu mila. Perhaps the Brayso now says we should say different. We should say that if you mechal Shabbos you chayiv misa, that includes even for a bris. Umani mekayim shmini yomo. When the Torah says you have to make the bris on the 8th day, what would that mean? Chutz me Shabbos. Besides if it falls out on Shabbos. Talmud Loima, so the Brayso concludes, but the Torah says, Bayayim afilu b'Shabbos. Bayayim tells me even on Shabbos, and therefore Mechalelel does not go on a bris.
Which malach is Mila?
The malach of Mila is, yeah.
Or Masakin Kli,
Not Chabala. Yeah. Omarov sagt the Gemara. So now let's understand pshat in this brayso. So here we have a brayso that says clearly like Rabbi Yechanan that you learn it out from Bayayim. But the question is, the brayso started off one way, and then the brayso says oy einoi. What's the two svaras of the brayso? First, the brayso starts off saying for sure bris is doicha Shabbos. Then the brayso says no, maybe not, and it brings the pasuk Bayayim. So Omarov, hi Tana meikara mai kanichale. What was he thinking in the beginning that it was so obvious to him that a bris is doicha Shabbos? And then, why did he change his mind and say, maybe not. Maybe bris is not Teicha Shabbos. And for the Gemara, Hachi Ka'amar, this is the Pshat in the Brayse. Shmini Yamal Afilu b'Shabbos. The Brayse starts off saying that it's obvious that a bris is Teicha Shabbos. Umani Mekayim Achaleleh Mois Yumas B'Shar Malachas Chutz Mimila. Chilul Shabbos would be any other malacha but not Mila. Aval Mila Dachya. The first svara of the Brayse is Mila is definitely Teicha Shabbos. Why? So the Brayse has a Kal V'Chomer. My time, you have the following Kal V'Chomer. Kal V'Chomer. Matzoras shedoiches avodah. If a kohen has a nega, if he has a nega, is he balmum, or it could be he's even tomei. So you can't do the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. Right? So the nega is doiches avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. Ve'avodah, the Gemara continues, is doiches Shabbos. The avodah is such an important thing, it's so chamor that it's even Doiche Shabbos, right? You have the Aveda of the Korban Tamid, the Musaf, and all the Avedas on Shabbos, that's all Doiche Shabbos. So Mila, Doiche Isa, Mila, a bris Mila is Doiche, the Isser of a Nega. So what does this mean? As we'll see soon in the Hemshech of the Gemara, there's a Isser, there's a lav, you're not allowed to cut off a Nega, right? Yishama benega tzeras, if a kohen, or if anybody has a Nega, you're not allowed to cut off the Nega. But what's if a kohen wants to do the Aveda? Because he has a nega, he can't do that. He wants to do that, he can't cut off the nega, right? So but what happens if there's a nega in the mokim of the mila? You're allowed to do the bris mila and cut off the tzaras. So mila is a more powerful mitzvah than the isser of cutting off the nega. It can be mekayim the mitzvah of mila and cut off the nega. So mila deichais, mila pushes off the nega. So for sure, Shabbos, shenitches mipnei aveda, Shabbos, which is a mitzvah that gets pushed off because of the aveda in the Beis Hamikdash, ein adin shetein mila deichaisa. For sure, mila should push off Shabbos if mila pushes off nega, which is a more stringent isra than the aveda in the Beis Hamikdash. You don't allow a kohen to cut off his nega. Right, so again, so mila is doiche the nega, and nega is not doiche the aveda. So for sure, mila should be doiche Shabbos. And for the Gemara, no. That was the first svara of the Tana and the Braisa. Umay oy einay de kama. Then the Braisa changes his mind. Then the Braisa says, no, this is not a raya. What's the oy einay? This is not a good kavachaymer. Hodamar. Then the Tana of the Braisa says, umimay de tzaras chamura. How do you know that the reason why the kohen can't cut off his nega, and then the issur of cutting off the nega is so chamer? That's the reason, and that's why he can't cut it off to do the aveda. Dilme Shabbos chamura. I would say really Shabbos is more chamer. Regarding Shabbos, you find in the Torah the isurim and the einish of skila regarding Shabbos much more than a nega, of cutting off the nega. Cutting off the nega is just a law that you get malchus for it. And another point the Gemara says, Inami umimai mishum dechamira tzarasi. How do you know that the reason why a kohen can't cut off his nega in order to do the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash is because this isser is so cham, such a stringent isser? Dilma, maybe there's a different reason. Mishum gavru delay chazi, because the person is not bechlal fit to do the avodah. And as Rashi explains, the Gemara is soon going to explain, what that means is, even if the kohen will cut off the nega, it's not going to help. He's still not going to be able to do the avodah. What happens after the kohen cuts off the nega? He's still going to be tomei. He still can't do the avodah until that night when he has to go to the mikveh. So he's anyways not going to be roy to do the avodah today, even after he cuts off the nega. So he's b'chlal, when he has a nega, he's the gavra, the person is b'chlal not roy to do the avodah. He doesn't have the mitzvah of the avodah. So if he doesn't have the mitzvah, there's no point of cutting off the nega to be able to do this mitzvah if he's b'chlal not roy to do the avodah. So therefore, the fact that he's not allowed to cut off the nega does not prove that this isser is more chomer than the avodah itself. Yeah.
It all stems from tzaras.
Yeah, the tzaras.
His not being roy is all stemming from tzaras.
In this case, when he has a nega, because he has a tzaras, he can't do the aveda. So therefore, the Braisa's conclusion is that tzaras, the nega, is not more chomer than Shabbos. Adarabah, Shabbos is more chomer. So you can't make a kavachaymer from the nega. So Omani Mekayim Shmini Yomol. So therefore the Braisa concludes when the Torah says to make the bris, I would say Chutz mi Shabbos. Besides Shabbos, I don't have a kavachaymer from a nega. Talmud Loimar Bayoim Afilu b'Shabbos. So therefore you have to bring a second limud that says Bayoim even on Shabbos. That's what's going on over here in this Braisa. The Havamin of the Tana was that you can make a kavachaymer from the nega, and the Maskan of the Braisa is you can't make a kavachaymer from a nega, and therefore you need this pasuk of Bayoim to say that it's even on Shabbos. Now the Gemara is going to bring the source of this inyan. When you get to a person that has a nega and the mokim amila, that the mitzvah of bris milah is doiche the isser of not cutting off the nega. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Braisa milah doiches atzaras. The mitzvah of bris milah is doiche the tzaras that he has ben bizmana ben shaloi bizmana. Whether the bris is being done in the time in the 8th day, whether not in the 8th day. Yontif ene doiche el bizmana. On Yontif, you're not doiche Yontif unless the mitzvah of bris milah is done in its time. But bizmana bulvad on the 8th day. Mino and Emili, from where do we know this? Going back to the first halacha of the Braisa, from where do we know that the mitzvah of bris milah is doiche tzaras, the ton, the rabbanon? So we learned in the Braisa as follows. It says in the Torah, Yimal besar or losai. The Torah says the bris should be done to besar or losai. It says in the Torah the word of besar, an extra word. Even if there's a nega there, you could cut off the nega for the mitzvah of bris. There's a lav that you have to keep the nega tzaras and you're not allowed to cut it off. It refers to any other place in the body, chutz mimila, unless it's in a place, the exception, in the place in the milah, you can cut off and be mekayim the mitzvah of milah. That's the beginning of the Braisa. Then the Braisa continues, similar to what we had before. Maybe when the Torah says the issur that you're not allowed to cut off a nega, that includes even if it's the mitzvah of milah. When the Torah says you have a mitzvah to make a bris, maybe that's only if you don't have a nega. But if you do, you can't be mekayim the bris. You're going to have to wait until the nega leaves. Talmud loymar besar. So the Torah says the word besar v'afapi sheyesham beheres. Besar tells me that even if there's a beheres, the extra word besar teaches me that even if there's a nega, you could be mekayim the bris. So again, we see here in the Braise starts off saying that it's deiche, then it says oi einoi, and then it says I have a special limud besar. So what's going on over here? Omar Rava. Hai tana meikara ma'nichale. Why in the beginning was it so obvious to this tana that the bris is deiche the nega? Ulubesayif my kashile. And then why in the end does he say that it's not so obvious, and he says you have to learn it out from the pasuk besar. And for the Gemara Hachikama, the pshat of here is as follows. Yimoil besar or losoi v'afa pisha yesh beheres. You make the bris even if there's a nega. Umani mekayim mishoma benega tzaras. When the Torah says you shouldn't cut off the nega, bishar mekaymis, it's talking about it in any other place in the body. Chutz mimila, unless it's the mitzvah of bris mila. Avol mila deiches tzaras, but it's obvious in the beginning the Tana held it's obvious that mila is deiche the tzaras. My time. What's the reason? Because there's a kavachaymer. The asim a kavachaymer. Uma Shabbos chamura mila deichaisa. Shabbos, which we concluded before, is so chamor, the mila could push it off. So tzaras, that's less chamor, it's only one lav, lekol sheken. Definitely the bris mila should be deichet tzaras. That was the first svara of the Tana. Umay oy ene de kamar. Well, then when the Braisa changes its mind and it says, or maybe not, maybe there's another svara. Hada kamar. After this, the Braisa says, mimay de Shabbos chamira. How do you know that Shabbos is more chamor than cutting off the nega? Dilma tzaras chamira. Maybe the tzaras is more chamor. Where do we see that tzaras is more chamor? Shekein doiches aveda. The nega, if the kohen has a nega, he can't do the avodah. Va'avodah deiches a Shabbos, but the avodah is deiches Shabbos. So we see that avodah is deiches Shabbos, but not the nega. So from this I see that a nega is more chomer. So there's no kavachomer. Talmud loymar besar, and therefore we have to have a special pasuk to say that mila is deiche the tzaras because of the word besar. Va'afal pisha yesham beheres. Even though there is the nega there, you could be deiche the nega, you could cut off the nega. That's the pshat in this Braisa.
It's not avodah. The avodah to tzachab, not by this person.
Okay, but this person has a chiyuv to do the avodah. If we're going to say that this person is a kohen and he has a chiyuv, a mitzvah now to do the avodah, nevertheless, we're doiche his mitzvah. Lishnach another pshat in the Braisa here. Again, what we're explaining is why in the beginning the Braisa held that it's poshut, that mila is doiche the tzaras, and afterwards the Braisa changes and says it's not so poshut. Mila deiches atzaras, my time, the svara to say that the mitzvah of bris mila is deiches atzaras. The reason is because we have a klal. Osi esa v'dachi lois esa. Whenever you have an esa and a lois esa that are conflicting with each other, the esa is always deiches the lois esa. So the mitzvah of bris is a esa. The isser not to cut off the nega is just a lois esa. So the esa is deiches the lois esa. Then the Braisa says maybe not. What's the Braisa saying? Then the Braisa says that no. When is an essa going to push off a lois essa greda? If it's just a lois essa, hi essa v'lois essa. Not to cut off a nega is both an essa and the lois essa. As Rashi brings when it says in the pasuk, Hishama benega tzaras, the Torah says Hishama benega tzaras, lishmer moed vilasais kechol asher. So because it says vilasais, that's also an essa. It's not so poshut that that's also an essa. Taisus over here says that you learn out other things from it. So, but here the Gemara is being machadish that the Tana now is saying that it's both a lois essa and an essa. So therefore it's not so simple that the bris, which is just an essa, could push off to cut off the nega, which is a lois essa and an essa. Right? So mani mekayim yimol b'sar losai. So if that's true, when could you make a bris? Bisman shein ba beheres. Only if there's no nega there. But if there is, you're going to have to wait until the nega will leave. Talmud loima besar va'afal pisha yesham beheres. So the Torah writes besar to tell you that the mitzvah of bris is even if there's a nega there. That's the conclusion of the Braisa, that you learn it out from the extra word besar that it says. Frag the Gemara teinach gadol. I have a raya regarding a gadol that it's doiche the isra to cut off the nega. The chsiv bei besar. When the Torah talks about the mitzvah of bris b'negei ta gadol, oral zachar shalayimel is besar or lasay v'nichrisa nefesh. We're talking about a gadol because it says kares. Kares has only b'negei ta gadol, which is a baranchin. So it says the Torah besar. Katan nami, regarding the mitzvah of a bris by a cotton, ksiv bei besar, it also says besar. The mitzvah of the bris, in other words, on the 8th day. B'yom hashmini yimel besar or lasay. Beinani minalon. But any other individual, if you're making the bris between the 8th day and his bar mitzvah, if the bris is happening in any other time in between, over there the Torah does not write the word bisar. It says bisar regarding the 8th day, it says bisar regarding a gadol. But how about anybody in between? So maybe over there it's not going to be doiche the nega. Amar Abaye says, Asya mi beinaya. This person in between, I learn out from both of these two together. Mi gadol lo yasya. So like we said, you can't learn out from a gadol. Why not? By gadol shekin onish kodesh. A gadol that doesn't make a bris, he has an einish of kodesh. A person that's not a gadol yet, he didn't make a bris, there's no einish of kodesh, he's not a gadol. Mikotten lo yasya, I can learn it from a cotton that's doiche the isser of nega, shekein mila bizmana. That's the mila on the right day, bizmana, that is different. So the person that's not doing mila bizmana, and there's no kodesh, I can't learn out from either one of them. But I can learn out from both together, from a tzad hashava. Hatzad hashava shebehen. But the common denominator of both of these is shekeni moilin. They have a mitzvah of bris. V'deichen es atzaras, and they push off even if there's a nega. Afkol sheni moilin. So too, any individual that has the mitzvah of the bris, deichen es atzaras. It pushes off the tzaras even if there's a nega. You cut off the nega to be mekayim the mitzvah of the bris, regardless if it's on the 8th day, after the 8th day. If he's a gadol, you always push off the nega to do the mitzvah. Rava says a different shot regarding this question. Rava Omar, Mila Bizmana. Doiche, the fact that Mila on the 8th day is Doiche the Tzaras, Leitzriche Kra. You don't need a pasuk. Rava goes back to the svara that we mentioned before. Rava does hold to the Kal V'chomer. Mikal V'chomer, you learn it out from a Kal V'chomer. What's the Kal V'chomer? Mikal V'chomer Asi, you learn it out from a Kal V'chomer. Oma Shabbos the Chamire Doiche. If Shabbos, which is much more chomer than the Isser of cutting off the Tzaras, the Mila is Doiche Shabbos, Tzaras the Kol Sheken. For sure the Tzaras should be Doiche Shabbos. So that's what Rava says. Rava holds that the tzaras is actually, Shabbos is more chomer than the tzaras, so we have a simple kavachayim. So for that you don't need a pasuk. So therefore the Torah writes bisar twice, right? But for one of them you don't need a pasuk. The fact that it's deiche, the bismana, you don't need a pasuk. So for the extra pasuk, we learn it out for the person that's in between. And we don't have a pasuk for him, so we put it on that. That's how Taisus explains it over here. That's Rava's pshat. Just to clarify one thing, right over here it says Rava Omar. Before in the Omid, when we said the previous pshat in the Braise, it also said Omar Rava. Before the Gemara concluded the opposite. Before the Gemara concluded that Rava is saying that the Issa to cut off a tzaras is more chomer than Shabbos. Now Rava is saying that Shabbos is more chomer than the tzaras. This is a very big problem over here in the Sugya. If you look at the names, it's the same individual. So Taisus over here speaks about it barichis, and the simplest pshat that Taisus says is that you have to change the girsa, and before in the Gemara it's not Rava, it's Rabba. Before Rabba was speaking, now it's Rava speaking. Okay. Talk to Gemara weiter. Amalei Rav Safra le Rava. So Rav Safra asks this question on Rava, right? The svara that we had before. Mimai de Shabbos Chamira. How do you know that Shabbos is more chomer? Dilme tzaras chamira. Maybe tzaras is more chomer. And the svara that we said, shekain doiches aveda. Tzaras is something that pushes off the aveda. V'aveda doiches Shabbos. And aveda pushes off Shabbos. So we see that tzaras is more chomer than Shabbos. So why are you saying that Shabbos is more chomer than the tzaras? So the Gemara again brings the svara that we said before. Hasam lav mishum de chamira tzaras. The reason why a kohen that has a nega, we don't allow him to cut off the nega, to be able to do his mitzvah, to do the avodah, is not because the issa to cut off tzaras is more chomer, ela mishum de gavra hu de lechazi. It's because this person is b'chlal not roy to do the avodah today. Even if he's going to go to the, as the Gemara will explain right now. The Gemara asks right away the question, Amai, why is this person not fit to do the avodah? V'yakitz b'hartoi v'yaved. He's not roy to do the avodah because he has a nega. Let him cut off his nega. If he'll cut off his nega, I'll be able to do the avodah. And for the Gemara, mechuset vilahu. No. But the problem is, even after he cuts off his nega, he still can't do the avodah. He has to go to the mikveh. So until at night, until the next day, he won't be roy to do the avodah. Right? So, and Rashi explains, he's going to be roy to do the avodah tomorrow. But for tomorrow, that's a different day. That's already a different story. Today, he has no mitzvah. So now he's considered to be a gavra that's loy chazi. He's b'chlal, the whole mitzvah is not shaykh to him. The fact that he can go to the mikveh and tomorrow will be roy, that's not shaykh already. That's not his mitzvah today. So therefore, you can't allow the kohen to cut off his nega to do the avodah. The whole person is not roy to do the avodah. Frag the Gemara, Teinach negoim tmeim. This is true that he still has to go to the mikveh if it's a nega, which is actually tameh. Negoim tahire ma yikala meima. What's if we're talking about a nega which is tahir? So now Rashi clarifies, a nega which is tahir, two things. First of all, a nega which is tahir is also something that makes the kohen not roy to do the avodah, because it makes him a balmum either way, whether it's tahir or tameh. And the second point Rashi points out is, a nega which is tahir, the issur of cutting off a nega applies not only to a nega which is tameh, it also applies to a nega which is tahir. Okay, so therefore, what are we going to say by a nega which is tahir? Let him cut off the nega which is tahir, and he can immediately do the avodah. Doesn't have to go to the mikveh. So the Gemara now changes and says another pshat. Elam Ravashi. Ravashi says that no, a kohen can't cut off his nega. Reason is something else. Hey, chamrinan the asi esse v'dachi lois esse. When do I say that if you have a mitzvah, the mitzvah saseh is going to be doicha the lois esse? For example, here. The kohen has a mitzvah saseh to do the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. He has a lois esse, he's not allowed to cut off a nega. So the mitzvah of doing the avodah should cut off should push off the lois esse to cut off the nega. But the Gemara says, when do I say such a thing? That a esse is doicha a lois esse. Kagain mila b'tzaras. For example, if you have the mitzvah of bris mila and there's a nega in that place. Inami tzitzis v'kilayim. Or for example, you have a tzitzis, and the tzitzis is going to be kilayim. You're putting wool and linen together, which is kilayim. Over there, it's going to be doicha. Why? The me'idna, the mis'akir lav, kamoiki asay. Sorry. The exact same moment when he's fulfilling the mitzvah, that's the exact same moment when the lav is being uprooted. Only if it's happening simultaneously do I say that the esse pushes off the lois esse. But hacha, by the case of the kohen that has a mitzvah to do the avodah, and he wants to cut off the nega to do the avodah, be'idna the mis'akir lelav, at the time that he's cutting off the nega, loika moikim asay. He's not yet doing the mitzvah saseh. The avodah he's going to do afterwards. So it's not happening simultaneously. So therefore, in such a case, we don't allow a kohen to cut off the nega. So the point that the Gemara Rav Ashi here is saying is, the reason why you can't cut off a nega to do the avodah is not because the issur of tzaras is so chomer. It's because it's not simultaneously. That's why. If it would have been simultaneously, maybe I would say that you could cut it off to do the avodah. But because it's not simultaneously, that's why you can't cut it off. So the point that Rav has said before remains, the fact that you don't cut it off to do the avodah does not show that the nega is more chomer. Shabbos is more chomer. That was Rav's shitta. Shabbos is more chomer than a nega. You can't cut off the nega simply because it's before the avodah. It's not at the same moment. Memela Rava holds you have a kal v'chomer. If mila is doiche Shabbos, for sure it could be doiche the tzaras. That's the conclusion of the Gemara over here.